Good morning, everyone. Calling the roll for the Monday, June 25th Board of Control meeting. It is now 11:03 a.m. Nan Baker. Here. Dale Miller.
Here.
Trevor McAleer serving as an alternate for Dan Brady. Armin Budish.
Here.
Angie Rich serving as an alternate for Dennis Kennedy. Here. Lenora Lockett. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Minutes from June 18th. Any corrections? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Public comment?
No public comment at this time.
Okay. No tabled items?
No tabled items.
Okay, let's go.
First item, item number BC 2018-389, Department of Development, recommending an award on requisition 42934 to Cleveland State University in the amount not to exceed $25,000 for economic research and advice in connection with the 5-year economic development plan. And it's for the period July 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018.
Good morning. I'm Paul Herdig with the Department of Development. This agreement with Cleveland State University will allow us to work with Dr. Irina Lendl and her staff at the university's Center for Economic Development. They are pretty well known for giving economic advice to a number of organizations, including Jobs Ohio, Team NEO. They're recognized as a regional center by the U.S. Commerce Department for this kind of analysis. And more specifically, we're going to be working with them as we work to carry out our obligation to support the county's 5-year economic development plan. There's a number of ways in which they'll be assisting us. One is in making sure that as we kind of analyze the measures and metrics of the plan, we're using the most appropriate kind of measures, that we're using the right data sources, that we're benchmarking appropriately against comparable counties around the country. We do have staff in-house, but we really need the services of doctoral level economists such as Dr. Lendl to make sure we're doing this correctly. They'll also be giving some advice from time to time on economic matters as they do for their other clients.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Oh. Councilwoman Baker.
Yep, soon enough. I guess I was a little curious as to why our economic development, which we've been doing this now for quite a few years,
Yes.
Now in 2018 decides that we need a study. And all the other resources out there, Greater Cleveland Partnerships, Tri-C, all the different partners that we have, even Jobs Ohio, can't perhaps help us in this partnership rather than going to Cleveland State and spending $25,000.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate the question. One thing I'd like to indicate is that we won't be commissioning a discrete single formal study here, as you may have seen them produce for other clients. This will be in the nature of ongoing advice as we go through the 6-month period, so that it will be supporting the work we're doing. We do, in fact, work closely with the staff at Team NEO, led by Jacob Doritsky, at the Greater Cleveland Partnership, led by Chris Urban, at the Fund for Economic Future, number of people there, Kevin and Peter Truog. We certainly won't be asking Cleveland State to duplicate the work they do, but there's areas in which the types of broad economic measures that are in the 5-year plan really go beyond what's available from these sources. And there's also a sort of coordinating aspect that's expected from Cuyahoga County that kind of indicates the need to do this. So again, it's not just a one-time study. We're looking for them for ongoing research and advice. And frankly, we'll be expecting that they'll present to Council's Economic Development Committee as part of this engagement, so that Council will have the benefit of Dr. Lendl being in front of Council.
Just as a follow-up, will the focus stay the same as it has been with our focus of trying to encourage business, having business come here to Cuyahoga County and also expand for those businesses that want to be here? Is that scope going to be the focus of what your continued effort will be?
Councilwoman, thank you. I would say we would certainly direct them in terms of the 5-year economic development plan, which as you know, is done in consultation with the Economic Development Commission and also Council. So certainly the research would be in support of the items that are in the plan.
Okay, and the charter.
Yes, the charter.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilwoman Miller.
Not so much a question, more a comment. I do think this is a good thing because it's a sign of our not taking the 5-year ED plan as just a chore that has to be done annually, but more of a live and active process. My advice is not to keep Cleveland State too far deep in the weeds of the narrow technical analysis of metrics, but to turn them loose to make comments on basic questions. And just two observations on that. One is we all know about John Pinney's presentation, raising some basic questions as to whether we have the right leadership and we're heading in the right direction. And the second thing is that at the Economic Development Committee meeting last week, where the plan was discussed, I heard some diversity of views. I heard the administration and some council members advocating a very broad approach that included not only the classic job creation, but also workforce development, education, and a very broad approach where others were saying that we should stick more to the fundamental things that economic development departments do, and as important as these other things are, leave them to folks that are focused in those areas. So some advice, information from approaches used in other cities across the country, and information of this type would be useful on that question as well.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to call the roll for Mike Dever. Next item is item BC 2018-390, Department of Information Technology, submitting an amendment to a contract with Peak Risex, Inc. for maintenance and support services on pressure seal, heavy-duty detachers, trim winder and sealer trim stacker, and station collator systems. And it's for the period May 25th, 2015 through May 24th, 2018, to extend the time period to May 24th, 2021, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $82,875.96.
Good morning, Janelle Green on behalf of the Department of IT. This item is in relation to the continuous feed forms that are used for financial reporting, W-2s, 1099s, and check runs by the Fiscal Department. This is a contract amendment to extend the time. We did have it at a lower price than the previous 3-year term. It's approximately $4,000 less. And was made aware that the vendor needs to re-register with the IG's office and OPD in order to do the ethics training and things like that. So I'd like to ask that you approve it with the stipulation that they get re-registered and get settled with OPD and IG's office before moving on into contracting.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman Miller.
Can you explain why this is coming in late, as the new contract period was supposed to start on 5/25 or 5/24?
Correct.
Or so on 2018.
Sure, it was. It's a contract amendment. Unfortunately, due to probably scheduling conflicts, we started this in April because it was only going to be an amendment of an existing contract, and unfortunately, we had it stuck in a couple of queues. We don't have an attorney assigned to us directly, so unfortunately, we have to wait until, something gets assigned to us. That was, one of the hiccups with this, unfortunately.
Further questions? Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you. The prior question that was just asked, do you see that you can perhaps make it on time next time?
Definitely. If we go through for an extension of this, we would definitely try to get it out much sooner than what we did with this one.
All right.
That's what we're trying to do, and working with the law department in order to see how that happens due to staffing changes there.
All right, good. It's good to know. Second, with the fiscal office being a huge part of the ERP, in fact, it's one of the
Most affected departments.
yes, most affected, most challenging, difficult, whatever. How does this fit into that?
So with this is just after items are generated, they have to get sorted because it's such a large volume of items that come through. So in terms of, and I asked this of the ERP team, they're just trying to work with the parameters that we already have. If this is some equipment or a step in the process that will be eliminated, we will terminate this contract because we do have exit clauses knowing that the ERP is coming. So we won't be tied to this contract for the entire time, in theory.
In theory, that's good to know. Of course, once you're in it, it's kind of hard to perhaps stop it. But is ERP understanding of what you're doing?
Yes.
And they are feeling that they are in cooperation,
Yes.
collaboration with continuing what they're doing and what you're doing to come together?
Yes, so a lot of the things that we have coming through, they get reviewed by Jim Hay, who is, working with that, and also Michael Young. And anytime I have any conflicts, I can go to, one of the ERP team members and ask some questions. So typically we try to make sure that we're not overlapping services.
So they are definitely engaged.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. McAleer.
Can you talk a little bit of rationale of decision to do a contract amendment versus going out to bid for the services?
Some of the rationale was this is actually a sole source item. So when we originally bid this out before, the last time it was sole source, and the sole source affidavit should be in the on-base item itself. So instead of going through that process, we just extended this contract.
So, and this might be for Lenore. If it's sole source, are we required to get a new sole source affidavit?
Lenore Lockett, Office of Procurement and Diversity. Yes, each purchase as a sole source must be verified that it is still a sole source. As we know, things change. And I always used the iPhone. At one point, iPhone was the only smartphone. Now we have several options. So every time we do a sole source purchase, it must be reconfirmed that it is a sole source.
And this was also reconfirmed. We had the vendor submit the sole source affidavit as well.
So we got a new affidavit for
Correct.
this contract?
Yes.
Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, item BC 2018-391, Department of Information Technology, recommending to amend board approval number BC 2018-381, dated June 18, 2018, which authorized an RFP exemption and award recommendation on requisition 42834 to DLT Solutions LLC for annual maintenance services for 25 solar wind software licenses and an upgrade for the period July 28, 2018 through July 28, 2019 by changing the amount not to exceed from $26,693.20 to $28,693.20.
Janelle Green, Department of IT. Again, this item was approved last week on the agenda for $2,000 less than what we actually needed. The original draft agenda did not have a dollar amount on there, but the bids and everything that we had in on base reflected the $28,693.20. So we want to make sure that the $2,000 gets added on so we can go ahead and move forward with this purchase.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, BC 2018-392, Department of Information Technology, recommending an award on requisition 42127 to DC Group, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $15,900 for maintenance and support services on universal power supply units at the various county locations. And it's for the period June 25th, 2018 through June 24th, 2021.
Janelle Green, Department of IT. This item was bid in by speed twice, and we move forward with the vendor, the DC Group, to provide these services at the 3 indicated locations throughout the county. So those locations have been verified by our IT department as being, 1215 West 3rd, 2012 West 25th, and 1200 Ontario.
Thank you. Questions? Yes.
The procurement and diversity, I forgot to also mention that this vendor will have to get registered also.
Oh, okay. So again, we'll like to get this approved so they can get registered with the IG and with the OPD's office.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve, subject to approval, subject to getting their certification or whatever we call it.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item is a two-part item, item BC 2018-393, Department of Information Technology. A, submitting an RFP exemption on requisition 42787, which will result in an award recommendation to Dell Marketing LP in the amount not to exceed $669.50 for the purchase of 5 VLA Windows remote desktop software licenses for use by Court of Common Pleas. And B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
Janelle Green, Department of IT. So these subscriptions are for the Court of Common Pleas. The subscription is bought off of our EA agreement that we have with Dell Marketing. These licenses will be in effect till January 30th of 2020. These are virtual server licenses that will allow remote access to servers for the Common Pleas Court.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, BC 2018-394, Fiscal Office, submitting an amendment to a contract with Stifel, Nicholas & Company, Incorporated for financial advisory services. And it's for the period August 1st, 2017 through July 31st, 2018, to extend the time period to July 31st, 2019, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $290,000.
Angela Rich with the Fiscal Office. We are requesting a 1-year extension to this contract. The extension after 1 year, we will be going out to bid for doing an RFP for these services. This additional year is only going to be $90,000 as opposed to the original $200,000. I see Bob France is here if you have any questions of him about the services that he'll be providing.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councilman Miller.
So should the not to exceed amount read 90,000 instead of 290,000?
Well, the original contract was 200, and then the additional year is 90,000, which makes up the 290,000.
But what it says here,
I would agree with Councilman Miller. Does that, the way it's reading, it seems the additional year is only $90,000. I shouldn't say only. The additional year is $90,000.
We can approve it at 90,000, and then I can check it when we get back to the agenda, to the meeting, and, I'm sorry, after the meeting, and then if it's different, we'll amend it next week.
Okay. You understand, though, was the original contract was
I
200,000?
understand,
Okay,
I understand.
great. Further, thank you, Councilman Miller. Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve with the caveat that we've been discussing. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Item number BC 2018-395, again, Fiscal Office, submitting an amendment to a
Let
contract.
me ask a question. I'm sorry to interrupt. The original contract was 200,000, which was adjusted to 125,000. Has that been approved yet? Is that right, Mr. France? As I understand it?
Yet that is,
That's part of the amendment.
yes, part of the amendment for the extension, Stifel agreed, we make two payments, $100,000 each. We haven't made the second 100,000. In exchange for this extension, instead of making a $100,000 payment, we'd make a $25,000 payment. And then the additional year, instead of being 200,000, would be 90,000.
Correct. That was my understanding.
Yes.
So if you could make sure that, so I want to make sure that this item that we're passing incorporates both of those. It's reducing the original contract from 200 to 125, and then adding another year for 90,000.
Okay.
Okay. Does everybody understand?
If I'm totaling that right, that comes to 215,000.
That would be a total of 125 plus 90, 215 for the 2-year period. Correct. Okay, you have that?
Yes,
That's what I want to make sure we're approving.
thank you.
Okay, so let me just, I'll take a revote just to make sure everybody knows what they're voting on. So all those in favor of the item as I just described it, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Thank you.
Next item, item BC 2018-395, Fiscal Office, submitting an amendment to a contract with Plant and Moran LLC for cost allocation plan, indirect cost rate, and management consulting services. And it's for the period October 15, 2017 through December 31st, 2018, for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $50,000.
Angela Rich, again, with the Fiscal Office. Plant Moran has been helping us with management consulting services. One of the services that we've been using for this project is the cash reconciliation project, which we've discussed with council and the audit committee and the executive's office. And we take this project $50,000 at a time to see where we're at. The fiscal officer has asked us to go back as far as we can, and we've been going back to 2012, looking at detailed transactions, having Plant Moran run these transactions through their software, and giving us recommendations of what our cash number should be, and also getting us a good cash number for the ERP project. So I request that you please grant us this additional $50,000 so we can continue this project.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes.
Councilman Miller.
I'll defer to Trevor.
Angie, I was just going to ask.
Mr. McAleer.
I know you touched upon this at the last audit committee, but just for the Board of Control and the council members, could you talk a little bit about the process once there's a agreed upon dollar amount, what council would have to do along with the county executive, just so everybody's on the same
Right.
page?
So once we come up with a number and we discuss that with the external auditors, we discuss that with Plant Moran, we discuss that with Dennis Kennedy, the fiscal officer, we would then be presenting council with what the proposed action could be. And I know that it will be a write-off. I don't have that figure right now, but at that time we'll be presenting you how we came up with the number, what the number is, and what that means going forward. And we're also heavily involved with the ERP system to make sure that this does not happen again. We're working with those consultants, and we'll also be running all that by Plant Moran to make sure that we're not missing anything so we can avoid this going forward.
So the write-off will be in form of legislation that?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Councilwoman.
Any further questions? Councilwoman Baker.
Right. How many times have we asked for 50,000 for each increment that,
This would be the second request.
and this is ending the end of this year? Do you expect to come back for more, or you feel like you're toward the end of it, or are we only halfway there and it could be a couple of more times?
I don't believe it'll be a couple more times. It could be one additional time, but Plant Moran bills us on an hourly rate, so it's not like we have to pay them 50,000. So they're only paid for the services. The 50,000 is going to be tight. We're going to have this completed by year end, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Miller.
When you say that there's going to be a write-off, are you saying that the general fund balance is going to be reduced by X amount, and we're going to say that there's a discrepancy that we couldn't find, and we're just going to say we're going to write it off? Is that what we're talking about?
In general, yes. The feeling is right now, with not all the processes done, is that this happened several years ago, and this discrepancy has carried over year after year after year. Cash is a cumulative process. So if you messed up back in 2009 and you never fixed it, that carries over to the present time. So we're trying to see if, that's why we're going back so far, to see if we can figure out when this happened, and then we won't have to make an adjustment, a negative adjustment to cash. We could fix the actual accounting issue. But if we cannot do that, it'll be, yes, an adjustment, most likely to the general fund, but I do not know that at this time.
And has Plant Moran found any discrepancies that helps pay for the 50,000 that we're paying for them?
They have made a lot of recommendations for improvement and efficiency, but they have not found any transaction in the last 2 years that said you did this wrong. So that's why we're continuing to go back.
And can you give us a number as to what the maximum amount of the discrepancy is, and hopefully by the time we get done it's less?
I don't really have that number. I'm reluctant to give that number until we get a little further along.
Just so everybody understands, this is something that apparently has been many years. Could be back in the commissioner days. And now that we're going to an ERP, we want to start with a clean number. So that's why we're going through this process at this time. And if we can't figure out, because it was back too far, then we'll have to do a write-off, but we can't continue to maintain two sets of numbers.
I would like for you to find out what the current maximum number is and let me know.
Yes, I'll definitely try to give you a range, but I don't know what the number is exactly yet.
I'm the chairman of the Finance and Budget Committee, and I got taken to task pretty bad because I didn't find out what was inside the Amazon thing, which I need information.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I may ask also.
Yes, Councilwoman Baker.
I guess my concern would be that we're investing, and I understand the learning process too, that has value, but that we're investing more than what we're going to be finding. And that if we're investing right now 100,000 potentially, if you use all this, which it looks like you will, and then go maybe for another 50 or a little less, that what we find may not be worth the investigation because it's such a small amount. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I know just in our own
Yes.
world of bookkeeping, sometimes it's better just to write it off because you're spending too much money trying to find it.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we did the 50,000 increments, because we didn't want to spend $1 million to find $1 million.
Right.
So-
Or less, or
Or less.
50,000 or 100,000
Or less.
yeah.
But Dennis Kennedy wanted us to exhaust all possible avenues, and he requested that we look back further beyond just 2016 and 2017, which is why we're going back all the way to 2012 for some transactions to try to figure this out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Fiscal officer is well aware of the point you're making and is trying to keep a balance there. Any other questions? Mr. McAleer?
Mr. Chair, just to add, this is something that's been in the state auditor's
Correct.
findings, I think, since 2013 or so. So I know the Fiscal Office has been trying to get this cleaned up. It's something that's been discussed, I think, at every audit committee as well since
Correct.
The findings. I think to Councilman Miller's question, I want to say I think the highest difference that I've seen so far in the state audit is approximately $800,000 or so is kind of the window that at least they're reporting in their audit. So just to give everyone an idea of the dollar amount that we're talking about.
Correct. Okay. I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, item BC 2018-396, Sheriff's Department submitting an agreement with Village of Woodmere in the amount not to exceed $5,000 for inmate housing services, and it's for the period June 26, 2018 through December 31st, 2018.
Lauren here from the Sheriff's Department, and like she said, we're submitting we received a contract from the Village of Woodmere to house their prisoners from June 26th till the end of the year, and it's revenue generating.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman Miller.
Why are we doing this only for 6 months at a time?
They just asked us to take it in April, and we don't take them until we get the signature from the executive. So once that signature goes in effect, we'll take them, but it's going to continue on past. We'll probably be doing an amendment at the end of the year.
Right now, you're asking through the end of the year. But I'm wondering, why wouldn't we do something like this for 3 years or 5 years?
Well,
why would we do this for only 6 months?
So the only reason why we're doing it through the end of 2018 is because when we did the other two, they went through 2018. So he thought, okay, we'll just keep them there. And because what will happen is in 2019, there's some kind of 2% difference that we may have to increase. And so instead of, I guess, taking one now and doing the increase and then, with the others and not the others, he figured we'll just go through 2018 and then starting from, I guess, 2019 on, that increase will go across everybody that we bring in.
And when you do the next contract, would it likely be for just 1 year or for more than 1 year?
We'd like it to be 2 to 3 years.
3 years.
But,
Okay.
with that increase, I guess he was doing it at a year at a time. And like I said, at the end of 2018, starting in 2019, everyone will get that 2% increase.
Okay.
Okay.
Further questions? Mr. McAleer.
Another question. The backup stated that the services include patrolling the streets. And I was a little surprised because I thought this was just going to take over us taking care of the inmates that we get from Woodmere.
Right. We are not patrolling the streets. We're only housing their prisoners, and then I guess their officers are going to be more on the street instead of housing the prisoners.
Okay.
We're only responsible for housing them, but not patrolling. Yeah,
Okay.
They will, though.
This is not patrol.
Yeah, that's what I thought was the case, but just wanted to make sure. All right. Thank you.
Anything else?
Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Dever. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, BC 2018-397, Court of Common Pleas, Juvenile Court Division, submitting an agreement with Positive Education Program in the amount not to exceed $38,900 for school-based liaison services, and it's for the period July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019.
Good morning, Karen Littman with Juvenile Court. This is a revenue-generating item with Positive Education Program. They pay for 50% of the salary and fringes of our school-based liaison that is in their school. It's essentially a probation officer who has responsibility for the youth that are in that program, so that school-based liaison could actually be there more during the day when the youth are in school and assist if there's any behavioral issues while they're there.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councilman Miller.
Not a question, but my wife works for the Positive Education Program, and so I'd like to be recorded as recused on this item, please.
Very good. Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Baker. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, item BC 2018-398, Court of Common Pleas Juvenile Court Division and Department of Children and Family Services, submitting an amendment to a contract with MST Services LLC for licensures for multisystemic therapy services, and it's for the period July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2018, to extend the time period to June 30th, 2019, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $14,000.
Karen Littman again with Juvenile Court. This is an item for the licensure and essentially like a franchise fee with MST Services. They provide a lot of the software and some of the forms and everything that both the court's MST teams and DCFS's MST teams utilize. So we went into a number of years ago, started doing this contract in collaboration with CFS. Then the price is exactly split 50-50.
Thank you. Further questions? Any questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Dever. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, BC 2018-399, Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Reentry, recommending an award on requisition 39931 and enter into a contract with YMCA of Greater Cleveland in the amount not to exceed $300,000 for transitional housing and case management services for ex-offenders for the Open Door Housing Program, and it's for the period January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018.
Good morning, Vicki Pope on behalf of the Office of Reentry. We are seeking this contract approval for transitional housing services that provides services to 35 men and 10 women, and there's also an abstinence program from drug and alcohol use. I know that it has been a great delay in this request. There has been numerous of mishaps that has happened along the way from our first draft of this RFP was completed on 4/5. There also has been a little different new procedural issues that equated into the delay as well. Tom Pristo introduced a new procedure to have all newer RFPs reviewed by Bob Math. That took time. OPD changed the RFP template. I'll deal with the other RFP. Had to be rewritten to fit the new template guidelines. And there were numerous of challenges that went into our move from Courthouse Square to West Shore. Computer issues, no access to on-base or shared drives. Both RFPs kept getting lost within the system, which made it challenging to converse with legal back and forth. But with all that being said, we do beg your pardon, and we do accept full responsibility for the late timeliness of this.
Thank you. I've already had a lengthy conversation about this also. Any questions?
Yes.
Councilman Miller.
Have any services been provided for under this contract?
Yes, services went uninterrupted from January until now. Right now, currently, they have 22 actual members already in progress with this contract.
It's my understanding, Councilman, that first of all, it is in the budget, so we did anticipate this, and second, there's been no payments made under this since the end of last year. So if it's not approved, they will not be paid.
They provided services in good faith because we have history with this program, and we provided on-time payments before. So in good faith, they went about just and didn't interrupt the services provided.
Further questions? Councilwoman Baker.
So this contract is for 1 year.
That's
6 months
correct.
has already passed. So will you be coming back to us at the end of this year to extend this contract?
Yes, they'll probably be amending it at the end of the year.
So when you come back to us, will you have all the issues resolved?
Yes.
So that we will not have another 6-month delay or even any delay?
Going forward, we're going to, in our forecasting, our planning, to make sure that none of this happens again, we'll include this, so that we'll have a more appropriate timeline.
And you don't have to answer, but when do you anticipate that we would hear from you, given enough now that you've learned how much time it takes? And that may have been just the first time it took that long.
It was.
But will we hear from you in October in order to give a 3-month lead, or?
Oh, no, we're going to try to make it that as soon as possible, probably by August.
August?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
I suggested to them they start tomorrow. Questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, BC 2018-400, Department of Health and Human Services, Offices of Reentry, recommending an award on requisition 39932 and enter into an agreement with Cuyahoga County Public Library in the amount not to exceed $100,000 for administration of the Cuyahoga County's Sheriff's Adult Basic Educational Services Program for inmates in county correctional facilities. And it's for the period January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018.
Vicki Pope, again, on behalf of the Office of Reentry. These services provide adult education services to inmates housed in county correctional facilities. There also was a great delay in this contract with certain previous issues that I've mentioned before, but also more so the legal made changes to the criteria of the contract requiring cyber insurance. So Aspire Greater Cleveland had to go through the bureaucratic approval process at the library, and the library had to obtain a cyber policy.
Thank you. And you'll recall that last Wednesday I asked that you have the director call me. I have not heard back yet.
To my understanding, I was told that she called and left a message with her office and that she was awaiting a call back.
Okay, I hope it wasn't on the same 6-month schedule. Questions? Mr. McAleer.
To the previous contract, has any money been expended?
No, not for this program as well. In good faith, they provided uninterrupted services.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next item, BC 2018-401, Department of Health and Human Services, Cuyahoga Job and Family Services, submitting an amendment to agreement with Department of Workforce Development for job readiness and training for recipients of temporary assistance for needy families and food assistance employment and training services. And it's for the period July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2018, to extend the time period to June 30th, 2019, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $100,000.
Good morning, Bob Math with Department of Health and Human Services. On behalf of Job and Family Services, this is an amendment to our existing interagency agreement with the Department of Workforce Development to continue to provide a full range of workforce activities to low-income individuals within the county. This contract, this amendment covers some salaries, operations, and we're mandated to participate in the JFS is a mandated partner in the one-stop system, and so that part of that amendment covers the cost of our mandated partnership portion.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, BC 2018-402, Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Children and Family Services, submitting an amendment to a contract for implementation of the open table model for transition age young adults previously in foster care by assigning the interest from Amber Donovan Consulting, LLC, to Community of Hope for the period July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2018, to extend the time period to June 30th, 2019, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $150,000. And I want to make a correction. The funding source is 30% Title IV admin and 70% HHS levy.
Good morning, Bob Math with the Department of Health and Human Services on behalf of Division of Children and Family Services. This is an amendment to a contract that was previously held by Amber Donovan to implement this open table model. I think many of you have probably seen a lot of the presses she's received this past year. It's working with children that are in the custody of DCFS who are aging out of foster care, and they set up these open tables that where actually the youth becomes, as they call it, the CEO of the table, and there are volunteers that comprise the table, and they work with the youth during the course of the year on a whole host of independent living skills and preparing this youth for eventual emancipation from the Department of Children and Family Services. I know there are a couple of questions I didn't have a chance to respond. One was on the funding. It's kind of an odd amount. The 70% levy dollars and the 30%, it's a rough estimate of 30% of Title IV. That's a state formula that's based upon random moment sampling, the number of children in custody at any given time. So it's a rather complex allocation formula the state uses, but that's how they come up with this odd number of it's roughly 70 to 30%. And I know Councillor Miller raised some questions about some of the outcomes. What we had when this contract was initially developed, there were no outcomes per se. And unfortunately, when we did the amendment this past year for this contract starting July 1, we added some specific outcome measures in the contract. So what we have, matter of fact, I just received a report from Amber Donovan just today on a kind of a year-end report giving some kind of the activities that were conducted during the year and some of our outcomes. And they indicated that, during this past contract year, they started 20 what they call open tables. With over 100 volunteers, over 134 volunteers that staff it. 60% of the young adults are attending college or in training. 80% are still working on their tables or maintaining relationships with their potential mentors, if you will. Going forward, Councilor Miller, what we did in the current amendment, we added some specific outcome measures that Ms. Donovan will have to, track and then report out to us during the course of the year. And some of those measures include stable housing, that youth who participate on one of the open tables, that they will secure stable housing, that they will attend, one of the outcomes measures is youth engagement, that they'll attend meetings, the regular meetings during the course of the training. They will provide pre and post tests to determine, the improvement and the functioning of the youth, and to ensure that they will not have any involvement in the legal system, and then based upon then a satisfaction survey that 85% of the youth that will complete the program will be satisfied. And these are some of the outcome measures that Ms. Donovan will be tracking during the course of the year.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Miller?
Do we have any projection on how many youth will be served in the coming year using the $150,000?
This past year, she set up 20 tables, and in conversation with Executive Budish, we amended the contract. We doubled the amount because she indicated she needs some additional staff to staff these tables. We expect that there'll be at least 40 tables during the course of this next year, which would be one youth per table, if you will.
So you're talking almost $4,000 per youth. So it's pretty expensive. The outcomes need to be good.
We expect them to be more than than good. Good, it won't be acceptable in our vernacular.
Right.
Couple
Is
other
there-
things, Councilman. This is our funds, which have in the past, I think, been pretty much the exclusive funds. However, she is now out trying to raise additional funds, so there hopefully will be even more tables. Our funds are these.
Okay, fine.
Yes, Councilwoman Baker.
So that's 20 tables, one per table, so 20 youths we're talking about.
Yes,
Is that right?
that's correct. And each table has about 6 to 8, volunteers.
And this contract extends till 2019 of June, so it's 1 year.
Yep, that's
It'll be
correct.
1 more year. Do you have any, and maybe it was already asked, how many youths you've already served?
Yes, they've, give me 2 seconds. I believe in this past contract years, they had 20 tables, so it would be 20 youth. But that contract was only $70,000 in the past. We're increasing it.
Was that, if I may, is that also for a year, that
Yeah,
previous?
that's
7?
correct.
And did you say how many youths? 20?
20.
Another 20. And if I just make, are some of these the same 20? that are
No, they'll
going?
all be new, there'll be new youth.
All new youth.
So the 20 that are already engaged the anticipation is they will continue to participate in the open table, well after they've become emancipated.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Miller. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Next item, BC 2018-403, Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Children and Family Services, submitting an amendment to an agreement with University of South Florida Board of Trustees for creation, implementation, and maintenance of the just-in-time foster parent/caregiver web-based training program. And it's for the period August 10th, 2015 through August 9th, 2018, to extend the time period to August 9th, 2019, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $27,235.
Good morning, Bob Math on behalf of the Division of Children and Family Services. This is an amendment with the University of South Florida. University of South Florida developed a web-based training called Just in Time that provides training videos for child welfare staff, foster parents and relative caregivers to help improve parenting skills and work with families that experience challenges working with the foster children. This is not a public website, but it gives DCFS staff and caregivers login access to a variety of videos. And then South Florida, their staff also provide monthly technical assistance to DCFS staff should questions, concerns, or additional information be required or needed.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Dever. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now have an item from the Agency of the Inspector General.
Item number BC 2018-404, Agency of the Inspector General, recommending to add additional exemptions from the registration and/or training requirements for a period of 5 years in accordance with County Code Section 501.19F for items A through H as listed on the printed agenda.
Mark Griffin, Agency of Inspector General. In 2016, the county amended the ethics code and changed the definition of contract and contractors who needed to register with my office. And one of the things that did is it changed the definition from only people who provided goods and services to the county to anyone who has a contract. So that created several item-by-item issues that hadn't been anticipated before. And my office had granted single-use exemptions for each basis. But as we had more experience with this, we saw that some of these were repeated and we could make broader exemptions. And so we are proposing exemptions from the registration process, not the bidding or contracting process, in order to streamline some of these exceptions that we see coming back on a regular basis. That way OPD doesn't have to come back to us and the contractors can move forward with their contracts expeditiously.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councilman Miller.
How many other of these general exemptions to registration do we have in place currently, and when do they expire?
So these are the only temporary ones. Actually, there are no temporary ones currently. So these are 5-year exemptions that will then reevaluate then. There are permanent exemptions that were part of the code as well, and those are 5 exemptions, for example, political subdivisions, public utilities. So if we were to do a contract with the city of Cleveland, they would not have to register court reporters, payments, for example, who receive direct payments from the county. So if you're on public support or TANF, that could be considered a contract. We've exempted them as well.
Okay, fine.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I move to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Item passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Please take a look at the items 405 to 411 on the consent agenda, and let me know if you have any questions. Are there any questions? Councilman Miller.
Question is on the item that says services received an invoice but not paid. Could someone explain a little bit as
Page
this is
11.
on page 11?
Page 11.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Could someone just provide a little background information on why we get items in this category and why they're separately listed?
Lenore Lockett, Office of Procurement and Diversity. As part of our standard review, if there are items that we've, as part of our, if the buyers determined it has already been purchased, then we put them on this list. Some of the items listed were, the first item was, I believe, caused by confusion over the exemption that was approved earlier this year. There was the thought that the exemption meant that it did not need to come to the board, but the actual exemption was that it did not need a competitive process because it exceeded the dollar amount. So once it became clear that there was confusion, we went back and for transparency and accountability of the record, brought those back to the board to get on the agenda. The second list, I believe, are items that were approved in general as part of an alternate procurement, where basically usually for DCFS is where they, the families choose the vendor and then they get reimbursed for the cost. So there's no way that we would know ahead of time what vendors the family chose.
So in the case of the first one, it should not have been done this way, and we're kind of cleaning it up.
Correct.
But in the case of the rest of them, there's really no other way to do it.
Correct. This is our way of complying with both requirements, that the families get to choose the services that they need for the child or family, and also to comply with the county code that if it's over a certain dollar amount, it needs to be approved.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Any further questions on any of the consent agenda items? Mr. McAleer.
Mr. Chair, not a question, but a comment, but just to add to what Director Lockett was saying, this section, Councilman Miller, used to be, I think, be titled items already purchased. And I think working with OPD, I think there was some general confusion of what was it paid for, was it, purchased, and discussions with some of the council members. We thought changing the heading would just kind of clarify exactly what category of purchases fall under this. So.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I move to approve the items on the consent agenda. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Baker. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? The consent agenda items are approved. Is there any other business?
No other business at this time,
Okay, thank you. Any public comment?
and no public comment.
I move to adjourn. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Dever. All those in favor, please say aye. We are adjourned.